Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Now let us look at the Roman law and how the law was introduced and implemented by the emperor. Okay. Now we know that the ancient Rome was ruled by emperors who were in absolute control of the empire. But in 509 BC, the Romans drove away the kings and the kingship. Okay, the monarchy was abolished. So instead of monarchy, a republic was set up. So this we have already learned about in the beginning of the chapter, right? So a popular assembly began to elect two rulers. So two rulers were elected and they were called the councils from among the patricians for a term of 1 year. So a group of wealthy Romans, they came to form an assembly who elected two rulers for a term of 1 year. These councils, they were judges, okay, they looked over the activities of the empire and they commanded the military in times of war, okay. They were helped by other officials which were elected by the popular assembly for a term of 1 year from among the patricians. They were helped by again another group of officials who were again elected just like them. Okay. After the end of the year for which all of them are elected, the highest officials became the members of the Senate. So after a year of service in the position of council members or assembly members, from here the members came to form the Senate. Okay. Now this Senate was a very important body of the Roman government. Okay. And it had immense powers. It had huge powers. And the councils which we already learnt about, who selected two rulers per year, the council sought the advice of the Senate on all matters. So the Senate was very important. Okay, the Senate controlled the finance and it also took control of the military affairs and also all questions or the establishment of peace within the empire. Okay. And the patricians called their rule, the rule of the Senate, as the popular cause or the republic in Latin. Okay, so a republic, the rule of the Senate was called republic rule. Okay, there was no monarchical rule or no monarchy, there was no emperor or king. In 27 BC, this republic again was removed and an emperor was again established and came to rule the Roman Empire. Okay, so there was a change from republican government to a monarchical government again, and this took place in 27 BC. Okay. Now, Roman political thinkers like that of Cicero, okay, now he contributed to the formation of the theory of government in Rome or in Roman Empire, okay. He was the one who gave the theory of sovereignty, which still is very relatable, applied to the government in all the countries around the world, okay. So he gave the theory or he brought out the theory of sovereignty, the principle of separation of powers between the state and the religion, okay, the religious head, and the concept and the idea that law must be paramount rule in the government, okay, so law must be applied to everybody. So these kind of ideas were given by Cicero, okay. But the despotism of the Roman emperors in the last phases of the empire gave setback to many of the theories, and their place was taken by Eastern concepts of the divine ruler. Now, despite these theories of government, of sovereign government, despite these theories, the Roman Empire, the Roman emperors, okay, they became despots. They followed the principles of despotism, okay, and they began to follow the idea that the rulers were to be the divine ruler, the absolute ruler of the entire empire, and a ruler who was close to being a god. Okay, so that kind of understanding of the emperor okay, of the ruler of the Roman Empire gave away theories like that of Cicero, okay. However, theories of Cicero continued to influence the rulers, continued to influence the Roman Empire, and this idea was used in the modern times. Okay, so this was carried by the people from the time of the Roman Empire, and in the modern time, in the modern period, this was used by the constitutional governments in Europe and in the West. Okay. Now, one of the important contribution of the Roman Empire was the establishment or foundation of the Roman law. Okay. Now, this law was so fundamental that it influenced the laws or the legal systems not only in Europe, okay, not only in the Roman Empire, but also in other parts of Europe as well as other parts of the world. Alright, so Roman law became the basis for the law codes in Italy, France, Spain, Scotland, Latin America, Quebec, Louisiana, and Japan. So you see, other countries also adopted or other countries' legal systems were influenced by that of the Roman law. Okay. This Roman law, which influenced the legal systems or the governments of other countries, this had not developed overnight. Okay, so this law took time to evolve and to appear in a shape, in a form that influenced the entire continent of Europe and other parts of the world as well. All right. The judges in Rome or the judges from the Roman Empire, they kept the law humane. Okay, what does this mean? They believed that every law should be what a man of common sense and good faith would deem to be right. That means every law should be applied to test every man. Okay. So they gave progressive ideas like that of the ideas of human rights, where they believed and where they propagated that a man accused of a crime is innocent until he or she is proven guilty. Okay, so until somebody is proved to be guilty, that person continues to be innocent. Okay, that person should be considered innocent. Alright, so this kind of humane element was added to the treatment of people and the use of law towards the treatment of the people. Alright. So this kind of law that existed in Roman Empire was collected and codified, okay, codified by the later period of the Roman Empire, okay, and this became one of the greatest contribution of the Roman Empire, and it influenced the nations not only in Europe but other parts of the world even today. It has continued to influence even today. Alright. Now let us look at the architecture. We looked at religion, culture, society, law. Now let's look at architecture. Now the Roman Empire, during the Roman period, the emperors built roads, bridges, and erected large buildings, aqueducts for the cities across the empire. Okay. Now, of course, the buildings and this architecture that the Roman emperors built, they showcased grandeur. They were grand, they were huge, and they also showcased pomp, like how fancy it was, how detailed it was. Okay, so these architecture being pomp and grand, there was a message behind it, and that was to tell the world of the power and wealth of the Roman Empire. Okay, the emperors wanted to build a grand and a pompous architecture to show the world, not only in Europe but the rest of the world and its people and its rulers, how wealthy, how powerful the Roman emperors were. Okay, so some of the buildings are that of Old Forum and the public buildings like the Bath. Okay. Now the Romans, we already know they were influenced by the Greek culture, by the Greek style and techniques. So the Romans used the Greek styles and techniques in their architecture. Okay, but as they were influenced by the Greek techniques, they also introduced new elements which were distinct to the Roman culture, which were distinct to the Roman architecture and art. Okay, now the Romans invented concrete, the concrete that we use even today while building a house or building anything in the construction of buildings, right? So that concrete which holds the bricks together or stones together, firmly together, that was invented by the Romans. Okay, so this invention of concretes, this made building of arcs and arches and domes possible. Okay, domes possible. Now, the arches, they were seen in the buildings, in the city square and in the streets. Okay, it was quite common. Now, even in this picture of Colosseum, you can see how the arches so many arches are built in this building, right? Arches were also used in bridges, in the waterways or aqueducts they were called. Okay. Now these aqueducts, they carried water from mountain springs into the cities. Alright. These were huge bridge-like structures, but actually they were drains and that carried water from the source to the different parts of the empire. Okay. Now, the dome, as part of the architectural element, this was used by the Romans to cover large spaces around their empire. Okay, a fine example of this kind of structure can be seen from that of Pantheon, which is a temple of all gods in Rome. Okay, and this building exists even today, and we can see it. And when we look at it, it looks like an enormous cup which is turned upside down. Alright. Now one of the special feature of the Roman architecture is that of the public baths, is the existence of the public baths. So these are baths but made in public for the public use. Alright. Now the Iranians, after they gained control of Constantinople and eastern part of Roman Empire, they introduced this notion of public bath that the Romans practiced, but this was not received well by the Iranians, by the Arabs. Okay, and the Roman emperor also built extremely well engineered roads. Okay, so one of the earliest Roman highway was the Alpine Way, and this was heavily traveled route. This received quite a traffic, all right, and this road reached the southeastern Italian ports. Okay, connected the southeastern Italian ports. Now the Flaminian Way, another highway, it ran northwest from Rome to the Adriatic Sea, and it connected with other two roads to the northern provinces. Alright, so these kind of highways were built by the Romans. Alright, it is said that the speed of travel possible on Roman highways was not surpassed until the early 19th century. So the kind of speed that you could gain by traveling through these roads, they could not be surpassed by any other highway that was built until the early 19th century. These roads were that good, that recommendable. Okay. Now next, let us look at sculptures, statues. Okay. Now the Romans, as we already know, they were influenced heavily by the Greek culture. Okay, so in terms of sculpture, in terms of statue making, the Romans were influenced by the Greek art of sculpture. Okay, the Greek style. They developed, the Romans, of course, like we talked about, the architecture and culture. Despite being heavily influenced by the Greek style, they maintained their distinct style, distinct Roman style. Okay, the Romans, as they built sculptures, they built portrait statues of a person, okay, and busts are only till half, okay, the head. So these were the highest achievement of the Roman sculpture, statues of people, the whole statue, and the bust, just the head part. Okay. Now the sculptors could not only, the Roman sculptors were so good in their craft that they could not only depict the person's features like nose, eyes, and physical features, but they could convey the person's character. Okay, whether I was angry, whether I was smirking, whether I was squinting, whether I was laughing, all that characteristics were conveyed by the sculptor. Alright. Now in the bust, if we look at this bust, which is called the money lender, the sculptor, the person who sculpted it, showed the greed and harshness of man who thinks only of profit. So by looking at that sculpture, the sculpture of the money lender, we can not only see the physical features, but we can see the harshness, the greed in that man's face. So that was the kind of art that the Roman sculptors could portray in their craftsmanship. Okay. Now, with the establishment of the empire in Rome, with the establishment of the Roman Empire, the sculptors now were to glorify and elevate the emperors. The sculptors now were to make the sculptures in such a way that they could portray the emperors in a particular way, the way that he liked. Okay. And in this, the sculptors were very good at. Alright, they could convey the characteristics of the emperor. Okay, so they produced the busts of administrators of the Roman Empire, the soldiers, and the emperors of the Roman Empire. Okay, the sculptors, they portrayed, they conveyed. Okay, they demonstrated through their craftsmanship. They portrayed the statues or the busts of the emperors as gods, as giants and heroes of myth. Okay, the frail Emperor Augustus. The Emperor Augustus was quite frail, weak. He looked weak, but he was represented as the mighty Jupiter with the goddess of victory in his hand. So that was the kind of portrayal that the sculptor did. Okay. The scenes showing emperors' triumphs and Roman victories are carved in the marble reliefs ornamenting arches and buildings. And the sculptors often, would depict the scenes from a battle in the palaces or decorated the walls of the palaces or by sculpting the scene from the battle. Okay, so that kind of craftsmanship can be seen from the Roman Empire. Now let us look at the literature. Just like architecture, sculpture, even in literature, the Greek style could be seen. Okay. Now compared with Greek literature, the Latin writing was more. Latin was the language of the Roman Empire. Okay, for the initial period. So the Latin writing was considered to be more moralistic and less speculative and imaginative compared to the Greek literature. Now the Romans, towards the later half of their rule, they became acquainted with the Greek language and they invented the Latin alphabet on the basis of the Greek alphabet. Alright? The Roman literature, which we are English, they are derived from the Roman literature. They remain one of the world's greatest literatures, largely because the Romans made original contribution in the fields of poetry, didactic poetry, historical writing, and satire. The Roman literature actually founded the beginning of poetry writing, history writing, and satire writing, criticizing or critical writing, of the government, of the emperor, etc. The most outstanding development in the early Latin literature was the drama. Drama was one of the aspects of that literature from which we can understand the development of Roman literature. Tragic drama was not popular in Rome, but they received delight in comedies. So these were many comedies that were written. They were adopted from the Greek originals and they were written into Latin. One of the laws of the 12 tables punished political satire with death. Okay, now political satires which criticized the government, they were actually punished by the emperor. So in order to avoid receiving punishment, if the writer wrote anything about the emperor, the Latin playwrights retained Greek characters. Greek characters were retained, but the names and names even in the plays about human life. So even the names were given the Greek characters, okay, so that the emperor could not make out, okay. The period roughly from 100 BC to the death of the Emperor Augustus is termed as the golden age of Latin literature. During this period, okay, during the golden age of Latin literature, Julius Caesar, one of the emperor, wrote his prose masterpiece about the conquest of Gaul or modern-day France. Cicero, the historian, most gifted orator of the age, created the finest Latin style for speeches, letters, and works in philosophy. So the works of Julius Caesar, Cicero, they are considered to be the important products of the golden age of Latin literature. Okay. Virgil, the most gifted poet of Rome, wrote a stirring epic poem which is called the Aeneid, and it glorifies Rome's mission to rule the world and give all people peace. Another poet, Horace, is one of the world's most quoted. Okay, another poet, Horace, is one of the world's most quoted writers of poetry because of his style and his sound philosophy of living, right? The chief historian of the Golden Age was Livy, who wrote the first history of Rome and called From the Founding of the City. His purpose of writing history was to arouse his countrymen's patriotism and make them give up their soft living and return to the simple virtues that made Rome great. So you can see during the age, this golden age of Latin literature in Roman Empire, there were historians, poets like Virgil, historians like Livy, etc. Alright? Now after this period, after the golden age, the Latin literature declined. Okay? Now two outstanding poets of this so-called Silver Age. So after the Golden Age came the Silver Age, where the Latin literature declined. So there were two outstanding poets from this period, and they were Martial and Juvenal. Okay, so they wrote poetry, and those poetries were used to criticize and ridicule the evils of the day, the evil practices, the evil traditions of the day. Okay, Plutarch was the most famous Greek writer of this period. So Plutarch was another famous writer of this period, the period called the Silver Age, which followed the Golden Age. Okay, he was interested in discovering those characteristics which made a man great. To this end, he analyzed the career of 46 famous Greeks and Romans in his work Lives. So he wrote a book called Lives, where he basically is trying to discover how a man becomes great, what qualities of a man make them great, by analyzing about 46 famous Greeks and Romans in that book. Okay. Now, with the fall of the Roman Empire, it does not mean that literature came to an end. It does not mean that these historians and poets just disappeared. Okay. Latin continued to remain the official language of the Roman Empire, okay? And this language, it bridged the classical and the modern language and thought. So Latin became a language which bridged or linked the classical and the modern developed languages, okay? So Latin gradually over time developed into many Romanic languages such as Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, Romanian. Okay, so you can see that Latin language was an umbrella language. From here, there were many languages that were produced, okay, that were gradually developing. And those are Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Romanian. Okay. The English language is also driven from the Latin language, and half of the words that we use in English, okay, of speaking, writing, half of them have Latin origin. Okay, so half of them are actually derived from the Latin words. Alright. Now let's look at science and engineering. Okay. Now, the Roman technology was the most advanced technology in the ancient world. Okay, during that period, the technologies used by the Romans, they were the most advanced ones. Okay, the Romans were great builders. They surpassed the previous people. Okay, their ancestors in terms of technology, in terms of building things. Okay, they were masters of civil engineering. They built roads, bridges, and tunnels. And how we can understand how they were masters of engineering is that they built this with knowledge of construction techniques, with tooling, metallurgy, practical hydraulics, and siphoning. And because of these techniques, which are unique and so advanced for that period, that these bridges, these roads, these tunnels continue to exist even today. Alright? So the Romans were not only good in building roads and bridges, but they also were good in mining, glass and glasswork, dyes and textiles. Okay, the Romans or the people from Roman Empire were very skilled people with very good knowledge of craftsmanship and also engineering. Okay. Alexandria was one of the center for study of sciences, okay, during the Roman period. Now, however, the scientists were still Greeks, but they were part of the Roman Empire, okay, and they influenced the culture and the society and the legacy, the contribution of the Roman Empire as a whole. Claudius Ptolemy was an astronomer. Okay, he compiled a mighty encyclopedia of astronomy, a huge volume of book on astronomy, and this remained the standard book for almost 15 years for the study of astronomy. It was such a foundational, such an elementary book, okay, for anybody who studied astronomy or who wanted to study astronomy. Now, Ptolemy also not only worked on astronomy, but he also worked on geography. So he extended his influence on geography as well. He was the first person to make a map to show the roundness of the world. People had different opinions about the shape of the world. So Ptolemy was the first person who actually showed that the earth was round. Alright? Now another physician, Galen, okay, now he was also trained in the institute at Alexandria, the Science Institute at Alexandria, and he was at the center of medical science, okay. His main contribution is that he demonstrated that arteries, which are part of our heart, that contained blood and not air. So it was believed by the Romans during that time that the arteries in the heart that carried or that contained air and not blood, and so people believed it. But Galen, the physician, was the first person to demonstrate, to prove that arteries contain blood and not air. Okay. Now another physician was Celsus. He practiced medicine in Rome. He wrote a monumental work in which we find descriptions of some surprisingly modern surgical operations, including removal of cataracts and tonsils and plastic surgery. Another physician who practiced medicine in Rome, he wrote a book where he talked about surgical operations of removal of cataracts that's developed in the eyes, tonsils, and plastic surgery. Okay, so these were already things that existed or people were aware in the Roman Empire. Okay, so the Romans also made huge contributions in healing diseases, in introducing medicines for the healing of diseases. Okay, they organized and introduced sanitation and public health measures. They established hospitals where poor they were provided free and medical health care. Okay, so in the system of in the sphere of medical in the medical sphere in the Roman Empire, the Roman emperors they focused for the development and contributed hugely for the growth and provision of healthcare, prevention of diseases, and also for the development of science and technology. Okay. Now, what is the significance of the Roman culture? All this while we learned about how great and the influence that the Roman culture, politics, law, religion has had in Europe as well as abroad. Now, let us look at the significance of this culture. Okay, so the Roman culture has significance not only in Italy, not only in Roman Empire, but beyond it. Okay. Wherever the Romans went, they built arches, they built aqueducts, they built amphitheaters, they built bridges, roads, etc. Okay, Latin was spoken. So these kind of architecture influenced the architecture within the Roman Empire after the fall of the Roman Empire, and it continued to influence the architecture in other parts of Europe and the world as well. Now, Latin, one of the important languages spoken in Roman Empire, it influenced languages that developed in other countries far away from Rome or far away from the Roman Empire. Okay, many works of Greek, many works in Greek and other languages from the eastern part of the empire, they were translated into Latin. So many works or many books in Greek, in Arabic, in say for example other Chinese, they were translated into Latin. Okay. Even today, there are names that we use for certain minerals, plants, animals. Now, these have scientific names. There are scientific names and there are common names. The scientific names of these things are still Latin names. Okay, so we still use Latin language. Its influence is so immense and widespread. Okay. Doctors write out prescriptions in Latin. Even today, doctors use Latin and they can write prescriptions using the Latin words for some medicine. Okay? Many use Latin alphabet and many modern words which are derived from Latin languages. Like I said, like we learned how Italian, Spanish, all these are derived from or developed from the Latin language. Even English language that we speak, it's derived from the Latin language. So you can understand the significance of the Roman culture that is present even today. Okay, so just with the decline of the Roman Empire, everything, all Roman culture, society, its tradition, its religion, that did not come to an end. The significance of the Roman culture, the significance of its tradition, of its politics, of its ideologies, it continued, it developed, it evolved, and its impact and significance can be experienced even today. Alright?